Story 1. The Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian Andersen. It was a lovely summer's day in the country, and the golden corn, the green oats, and the haystacks in the meadows looked beautiful. The stork walking about on his long red legs chattered in Egyptian, a language he had learnt from his mother. The cornfields and meadows were surrounded by large forests with deep pools. It was certainly lovely, being able to walk about in the country. Near a deep river in a sunny spot, there was a nice old farmhouse, and great big burdock leaves were growing all the way from the house to the water, and they were so high that a small child could stand upright under the tallest of them. The spot was as wild as the middle of a thick wood. In this smug retreat, a duck was sitting on her nest, waiting for her young brood to hatch. She was beginning to get a bit fed up, as the little ones were a long time coming out of their shells, and she didn't have many visitors. The other ducks always preferred swimming about on the river to climbing the slippery banks to sit under a burdock leaf and gossip with her. Eventually, one shell cracked, and then another. And from each egg came a living creature that lifted its head and cried, "Peep, peep." "Quack, quack," said the mother, and then they all gave their best quacks and looked around at the large green leaves. Their mother let them look as much as they liked, because green is good for the eyes. "The world is really big," the young ducks said when they found how much more room they had now compared with inside their shell. "Do you think this is the whole world?" asked the mother. "Wait till you've seen the garden. It stretches far beyond there, as far as the parson's field. But I've never actually gone that far." "So, I hope you're all out," she continued, getting up. "No, I declare, the largest egg is still there. I wonder how long this will last. I can't take much more of this." And she sat back down on the nest. "Well, how are you getting on?" asked an old duck who came to visit. "One egg hasn't hatched yet," said the duck, "and it doesn't look like it's going to either. Just look at all the others. Aren't they the prettiest little ducklings you ever saw? They are the image of their father, but he's wicked. Why doesn't he ever come to see me?" "Let me see the egg that won't break," said the duck. "I have no doubt it's a turkey's egg. I was talked into hatching some once, and after all the care and trouble I went to with the young ones. They were afraid of the water. I quacked and clucked, but it did no good. I couldn't get them to go in. Let me look at the egg. Yes, that's a turkey's egg. Take my advice. Leave it where it is and teach the other children to swim. I think I'll sit on it a while longer, said the duck. I've been sitting for such a long time already, so a few more days won't matter. Please yourself, said the old duck, and she went away. The large egg cracked eventually, and a young thing crept out crying, "Peep, peep." It was very large and ugly. The duck stared at it and exclaimed, "It's huge and not at all like the others. I wonder if it really is a turkey." We'll soon find out, though, when we go to the water. It has to go in, even if I have to push it in myself. The next day, the weather was delightful, and the sun shone brightly on the green burdock leaves. So the mother duck took her young family down to the water and jumped in with a splash. "Quack, quack," she cried, and one after the other, the little ducklings jumped in. The water closed over their heads, but they came up again in an instant. They swam about quite prettily, with their legs padding easily underneath them, and the ugly duckling was in the water swimming with them too. "Oh," said the mother, "he isn't a turkey. He uses his legs really well, and he holds himself quite upright. He is my child, and he's not so ugly after all, if you look at him properly. Quack, quack. Come with me now. I'll introduce you to the world and to the farmyard, but you must keep close so you don't get trodden on. And, above all, beware of the cat." When they reached the farmyard, there was a great disturbance. 2 families were fighting for an eel's head, which had been carried off by the cat. "See, children, that is the way of the world," said the mother duck, licking her beak because she would have liked the eel's head herself. "Come on then, let me see how well you can use your legs." "You must bow your heads prettily to that old duck over there. She's the highest born of them all, and she has Spanish blood, which means she's well off. Can you see she has a red ribbon tied to her leg? That says she's very grand, and it's a great honor for a duck. It shows that no one wants to lose her, and she can be recognized by both man and animals. Come now, don't walk with your toes turned in. A well-bred duckling spreads his feet wide apart, just like his father and mother, like this. Now, bow your head and say, 'Quack.'" The ducklings did as they were told, But a duck stared at them and said, "Look, here comes another brood. Aren't there enough of us already? And what a queer-looking thing one of them is. We don't want him here." At this point, one duck flew out and bit him on the neck. "Leave him alone," said the mother. "He isn't doing any harm." "I know, but he's so big and ugly," said the spiteful duck. "So he has to be thrown out." "The others are very pretty children," said the old duck, the one with the ribbon on her leg. "All but that one. I wish his mother could do something to make him look nicer." "That's impossible, Your Grace," replied the mother. "I know he isn't pretty, but he has a very nice nature and swims as well or even better than the others. I think he'll grow up pretty, and perhaps he'll seem smaller. He stayed too long in the egg, and so his body isn't properly formed." And then she stroked his neck and smoothed his feathers, saying, "He's a drake, and so it isn't that important. I think he'll grow up to be strong and able to take care of himself." "The other ducklings are graceful enough," said the old duck. "Now, make yourself at home, and if you can find an eel's head, bring it to me." And so, having been invited in, they made themselves comfortable. The poor duckling, the one who had climbed out of his shell last of all, and who looked so ugly, was bitten and pushed and made fun of, not only by the ducks, but by all the poultry. "He is too big," they all said, and a turkey cock, who had been born into the world with spurs on his heels, and who fancied himself as some sort of emperor, puffed himself out like a ship in full sail and flew at the ugly duckling. He went quite red in the face with passion, and the poor little thing didn't know where to go. He was just so miserable because he was really ugly and laughed at by all the animals in the farmyard. And so it went on, day to day, getting worse and worse. The poor duckling was bullied by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were unkind to him, and would say, "Ah, you ugly creature, I wish the cat would get you." And even his mother said she wished he had never been born. The ducks pecked him, the chickens beat him, and the girl who fed the poultry kicked him with her feet. So, eventually, he ran away, frightening the little birds in the hedges as he flew through the air. "They are afraid of me because I am ugly," he said, closing his eyes. He flew on further until he came to a large moor where lots of wild ducks lived. He stayed here for a night, feeling very tired and sorry for himself. In the morning, when the wild ducks flew up into the air, They stared down at their new comrade. "What sort of a duck are you?" they all asked. He bowed to them and was as polite as he could be, but he did not answer their question. "You are very ugly," said the wild ducks. "But that doesn't matter, as long as you don't want to marry anyone from our family." Poor thing. He hadn't even thought about marriage. All he wanted was permission to lie down among the rushes and drink some of the water on the moor. After 2 days, 2 wild geese came to the moor. Actually, they were goslings, as they hadn't been hatched for very long, and they were very rude. "Listen, friend," one of them said to the duckling. "You are so ugly that we like you. Will you emigrate with us? Not far from here, there's another moor, and there are some pretty wild geese there, all of them unmarried. It is a great chance for you to find a wife. You might be lucky, ugly as you are." Bang, bang, was heard in the air, and at that very moment, the 2 wild geese fell dead among the rushes, coloring the water with their blood. The bang echoed far and wide in the distance, and the whole flocks of wild geese rose up from the rushes. The bangs kept coming from every direction, because the shooters surrounded the moor, and some were even sitting on the branches of trees around the rushes. The blue smoke from the guns rose like clouds over the dark trees, and as it floated away across the water, a number of hunting dogs bounded into the rushes, which gave way beneath them. They really terrified the poor duckling. He turned his head to hide it under his wing, and just at that moment, a large, terrible dog passed quite near him. His jaws were open, his tongue hung from his mouth, and his eyes glared scarily. He thrust his nose close to the duckling, showing his sharp teeth, and then, splash, splash, off he went into the water without even touching him. "Oh," sighed the duckling with relief. "Now I'm glad I'm so ugly. Even a dog doesn't want to eat me." And he lay quite still, while shots rang out through the rushes, and gun after gun was fired over him. It was very late when things quietened down, but even then, the poor young thing didn't dare move. He waited quietly for several hours, and then, after looking around carefully, he left the moor as fast as he could. He ran over field and meadow until a storm started up, and he could hardly move through it. Towards the evening, he reached a poor little cottage that looked as if it might fall down, and was only standing because it couldn't decide which side should fall down first. The storm was so violent that the duckling couldn't go any further. He sat down by a cottage, and then noticed that its door wasn't quite closed because one of the hinges had given way. There was a narrow opening near the bottom of the door, which was large enough for him to slip through, and which he did very quietly to find some shelter for the night. An old woman, a cat, and a hen lived in this cottage. The cat, who was called "My Little Son" by the old lady, was a great favorite. He could raise his back and purr, and could even throw sparks out from his fur if he were stroked the wrong way. The hen had very short legs, so she was called Chicken Shortlegs. She laid good eggs, and her mistress loved her as if she had been her own child. In the morning, the strange visitor was discovered, and the cat began to purr, and the hen to cluck. "What's going on?" asked the old woman, looking round the room, although her sight was not very good. So, when she saw the duckling, she thought it must be a fat duck that had strayed from home. "Oh, what a prize!" she exclaimed. "I hope it is not a drake, because then I'll have some duck's eggs. I must wait and see." So, the duckling was allowed to stay for 3 weeks to see what happened. But there were no eggs. Now the cat was the master of the house, and the hen was the mistress, and they always said, "We and the world," as they believed themselves to be half the world, and the better half at that. The duckling thought that others might have a different opinion on the subject, but the hen wouldn't listen to such thoughts. "Can you lay eggs?" she asked. "No." "Then have the goodness to hold your tongue." "Can you raise your back, or purr, or throw out sparks?" asked the cat. "No." "Then you have no right to express an opinion when sensible people are speaking." So, the duckling sat in a corner, feeling very low indeed, until the sunshine and the fresh air entered the room through the open door. Then he began to feel a great longing for a swim on the water that he couldn't help telling the hen. "What a stupid idea," said the hen. "You have nothing better to do, so you have daft fantasies. If you could purr or lay eggs, you wouldn't have them." "But it is so delightful to paddle about on the water," said the duckling, "and so refreshing to feel it close over your head when you dive to the bottom." "Delightful indeed," said the hen. "You must be crazy. Ask the cat. He's the cleverest animal I know. Ask him how he would like to swim about on the water, or to dive under it, because I'm not going to give you my own opinion. Ask our mistress, the old woman. There is no one in the world cleverer than her. Do you think she would like to swim, or let the water close over her head?" "You don't understand what I'm saying," said the duckling. We don't understand you, and don't know who does. Do you think you're cleverer than the cat, or the old woman, not to mention me? Don't even think about it, child, and thank your lucky stars that you have been welcomed here. You're in a warm room, and in a group who can teach you something, aren't you? But you are a chatterer, and we don't enjoy your company. Believe me, I'm saying this for your own good. I may tell you unpleasant truths, but that is only proof of my friendship. I advise you, therefore, to lay eggs and learn to purr as quickly as possible. I think I should go out into the world again, said the duckling. Yes, do, said the hen. So the duckling left the cottage and soon found some water to swim on and dive in. But other animals didn't go there because it looked ugly. Autumn came, and the leaves in the forest turned to orange and gold. Then, as winter approached, the wind caught them as they fell and whirled them into the cold air. The clouds, full of hail and snowflakes, hung low in the sky, and a raven stood on the ferns, crying, "Croak, croak." You shivered with cold when you looked at him. This was all very sad for the poor little duckling. One evening, just as the sun was setting among the radiant clouds, a large flock of beautiful birds came out of the bushes. The duckling had never seen birds like them before. They were swans. They curved their graceful necks, and their soft plumage shone with dazzling whiteness. They uttered an unusual cry as they spread their glorious wings and flew up and away from these cold parts to warmer lands across the sea. They flew higher and higher in the air, and the ugly duckling felt quite a strange sensation as he watched them. He whirled himself in the water like a wheel, stretched out his neck towards them, and uttered a cry so strange that it actually frightened him. He would never forget those beautiful, happy birds. And when, at last, they were out of his sight, he dived deep into the water, and then swam up again, almost beside himself with excitement. He didn't know what these birds were called, or where they had flown to, but he felt something for them that he had never felt for any other bird in the world before. He was not envious of these beautiful creatures, but he did want to be as lovely as they were. Poor, ugly creature. He would have lived so happily with the ducks if only they had encouraged him. The winter grew colder and colder. He had to swim about on the water to keep it from freezing. But every night, the space he had to swim in became smaller and smaller. Eventually, It froze so hard that the ice in the water crackled as he moved, and the duckling had to paddle with his legs as well as he could to stop the space from closing up. Finally, he was exhausted and lay still and helpless, frozen fast in the ice. The following morning, a peasant walking by saw what had happened. He broke the ice into pieces with his wooden shoe and carried the duckling home to his wife. The warmth revived the poor little creature, but when the children wanted to play with him, the duckling thought they would hurt him, so he jumped, terrified, and fluttered into the milk pan, splashing milk around the room. Then the woman clapped her hands, and so he was even more frightened. Then he flew into the butter cask, then into the meal tub, and then out again. He was in such a mess. The woman screamed and lashed out at him with tongs, and the children laughed and screamed, tumbling over each other, trying to catch him. Luckily, though, he escaped. The door stood open, and the poor creature just managed to slip out towards the bushes, where he lay down, exhausted, in the newly fallen snow. You would be upset to hear about all the misery and hardships the poor little duckling had to cope with during the hard winter. But when it passed, he found himself lying one morning on a moor amongst the rushes. He felt the warm sun shining and heard the lark singing and saw that the beautiful spring had arrived. Then the young bird felt that his wings were strong enough, and he flapped them against his sides. He rose high into the air. His wings carried him onwards, and, before he realized what had happened, he found himself in a large garden. The apple trees were in full blossom, and the fragrant branches bent their long green branches down towards the stream, winding its way around a smooth lawn. Everything looked beautiful in the freshness of early spring. From a thicket close by came 3 beautiful white swans, rustling their feathers and swimming lightly over the smooth water. The duckling remembered the lovely birds he had seen before and, strangely, felt unhappy than ever. "I will fly towards those royal birds," he exclaimed. "But they might kill me because I'm so ugly and am daring to approach them. But it doesn't matter. Better be killed by them than pecked by the ducks, beaten by the hens, pushed about by the woman who feeds the poultry, or die starving hungry in the winter." Then he flew onto the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. The moment they saw the stranger, they rushed to meet him with outstretched wings. "Kill me, kill me," said the poor bird, and he bent his head down to the surface of the water and waited for death. But what did he see in the clear water below? his own image, no longer a dark, gray bird, ugly to look at, but a graceful and beautiful swan. To be born in a duck's nest, in a farmyard, is of no consequence to a bird if he's hatched from a swan's egg. He now felt happy to have suffered sorrow and trouble, because it enabled him to enjoy so much more all the pleasure and happiness around him. And the great swans swam around the newcomer and stroked his neck with their beaks in welcome. Then some little children came into the garden and threw some bread and cake into the water. "Look!" cried the youngest. "There's a new swan." They were all delighted and ran over to their father and mother, dancing and clapping their hands and shouting joyfully, "Another swan has come! A new one has arrived!" Then they threw more bread and cake into the water and said, "The new one is the most beautiful of all. He is so young and pretty." And the old swans bowed their heads before him. Then he felt quite embarrassed and hid his head under his wing. He didn't know what to do. He was so happy, but not at all conceited. He had been persecuted and despised for his ugliness, and now he heard them say he was the most beautiful of all the birds. Even the lilacs bent their branches down into the water before him, and the sun shone warm and bright. Then he rustled his feathers, curved his slender neck, and cried joyfully from the depths of his heart, "I never dreamed of happiness like this when I was an ugly duckling." The end.